Hello neighbors, it's Brad here from etrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Demco diode wiring kit on a 2025 Ford Maverick. And this is going to be a great way for flat towing a Maverick to get your light signals to mimic what your RV is doing, keeping you safe and legal. And that's going to include your running lights, turn signals, as well as brake lights. And sometimes even some of your braking systems are going to require tapping into that diode wiring. So overall, this is a really easy and efficient way to get the light signals to work on the taillights rather than sometimes you'd see magnetic tow lights. No longer are really vehicles magnetic on some of them, and really finding a spot to put those and store them each time can be a hassle. So diodes really just make it a clean one-time installation, and it makes it plug and play. Every single time you hook up your umbilical, it'll be ready to get that light signal. And what involves to get that to work is actually pretty simple. You have your umbilical going from the 7-way to the 6-pole that's going to be on the front of your towed vehicle. And the umbilical and the 6-pole are included with that kit, so you're getting some of those connections. From there, the 4-pole wiring will route from the front all the way to the back, where we'll split off and go to the taillights, and that's where we put our diodes in. The diodes just act as a one-way electrical check valve, so that way you can still get those signals to the taillights when you're not driving it, but your factory OEM wires will still be able to work when you're normally driving the vehicle. But when you plug it all in, it's going to send that signal here, and there's really no worry after that. Now, with the installation, you are going to be cutting some of your factory wires, and that can be scary, especially on a brand new truck, to be able to cut into that. But these are super reliable and pretty easy to do, especially on the Maverick. There's plenty of space for them to live behind the taillight, and the installation's pretty simple as well. I'm going to walk you through step by step to make sure you get it installed. Now, if you watch this and decide I don't have the place, the time, the space, or the tools to do all that, totally get it, but having diodes on a flat towed vehicle is part of many parts of a system coming together for it to work. So this is, I would say, one of the easier installations when referencing, doing a braking system or something along those lines, or even a base plate. So if you've done those yourself, diodes are super easy to do. If you're having everything else done, not to worry. You could reach out and find someone close to you to get them installed by using our dealer locator, and that way you can get them installed. You can be flat towing down the road, and everyone's happy. But for those of you that are DIYing this, stick around. I'll walk you through, give you some tips and tricks, and we'll make sure to get these Demco diodes installed on your Maverick. To get your installation started, I would recommend doing this at the same time you're doing your base plate or any of your other components for your flat tow, because the availability to be able to run your wires really clean and just get a good path is super easy when you have the fascia off. Now, after the fact, it's still doable. It is a lot more difficult. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is get our 4-wire roll all undone, because we're going to start routing this from the front of the vehicle to the taillights. And as I mentioned, we have our fascia off here. We have a Roadmaster bracket on our Maverick today that's got a nice bracket. I'm going to keep this loose because this will slide really nicely over the grill, but this will have to kind of wiggle its way through. So it is hard to get this attached after the fact, but I have this loosely attached so we can know roughly where our wires will be. If you know where you're going to mount your 6-pole, perfect. Go ahead and grab your wires. So you have your red wire, or the red wire here. I have a charge line. So if you're running a charge line, that's something I'll point out now. You're going to want to do this at the same time because it's all going to go into that 6-pole plug, and I run all of mine into the engine bay. So it's going to have a similar path for a little bit. But pull enough to where, our plug's going to sit here, and we're going to go in the back. Leave yourself some slack. So once you pull maybe 2 inches past where your 6-pole is going to mount, or close to there, just tape it up or zip tie it. That way we have that ready to go. I did put some wire loom on here on the front just to kind of clean that up. And from here, our Roadmaster base plate has a nice zip tie spot. I just ran this up and routed it up into the engine bay. And the reason I do this is dependent on your braking system. One that comes to mind is the Stay and Play Duo. It does need to be spliced into your running light signal, and having it in the engine bay to make all those connections is really going to make it a lot easier on yourself. If you don't have that braking system, it's still not a bad idea to run that extra up. That way, if for whatever reason you had to cut this wire to put a new plug on, you can pull that slack out and you're not going to be too tight. So just routing this up, there's a nice open spot. You're going to make your way to the right of the air box roughly, and that's where you can see that I just zip tied up this loop. It's about, I'd say maybe 8 inches, maybe 10, but that's going to be plenty, again, if we ever have to tap into it. From here, the wiring originally was 4 wires, and you're going to want to take the white wire and peel all of it back until you get it to a point where you can cut and put a ring terminal to attach it to the ground. Now, that white wire is not all for naught. It's actually going to be helping us because later on we're going to be using this as a jumper wire. So you can see, I mean, I would say over 75% of it I peeled back, I cut the white wire, and this vehicle actually has like 3 grounds right here, super easy. I will say the ring terminal that they give you is a smaller diameter than all of those bolts, so I just got a slightly larger one before attaching it to this ground. And you need to ground up your wiring, that way you get that clean electrical signal. I try to use factory grounds in the engine bay, and generally your braking system is going to have grounds as well. So keeping the same ground just makes it nice and easy. If you do have any electrical issues, you can troubleshoot that ground, and the factory one's generally going to be a good spot. So we have our white wire. I continued my diode wiring. I just went back and looped it down. Now, throughout the whole process, really trying to utilize the factory wire loom or spots to just keep the wire up without a zip tie is going to be your best bet. And then we're going to add zip ties where it has the potential to kind of flop around. But we're going to avoid anything moving or hot or even pinch points to make sure that this wires, they last, for the lifespan of the vehicle. So once I routed it down at the back of our firewall, I went down towards our cross member, and that's where I'll raise this up and show you where it comes out. You may want to lower the underbody panel just to feed the wires. If you're doing this not on a lift though, your best bet is just route it up over this cross member. So you'll see that the sway bars there, this isn't going to cause any issues. It's a pretty clean path straight down. And then this underbody panel, there's going to be some screws that you can remove along the whole way. Now, you don't have to do it on this inside portion. You can actually go on the outside. There's some plastic clips that you could pop out, and that's going to make it easy where you really don't even have to get underneath the vehicle for a good majority, because this whole panel, once you have your wires tucked in, you see mine's just kind of draped in here, but that hardware is going to keep this all in place as we tighten it back up, and it's going to keep it protected as well. So as we make our way all the way down this underbody panel, we make our way up. There's this fuel strap here. I just went up over the rear cross member, and then I went to the factory wire loom. There's a large harness that's kind of right underneath our bed here. And this is where I split my wires off. So again, you'll see kind of how I use the factory wires to hold everything up. That really just makes it a lot easier. I left my zip ties on here so you can see them. But we'll take our yellow and brown, so split that off, route this over, and if you reach up kind of in this pocket here, you can pull this out and it's going to be draped, which is nice. It keeps it away from the exhaust the entire way, and eventually we'll be pulling this up into our taillight pocket. On the green, that's going to be our right turn signal. Similar concept here. You'll see this nice angry looking tire hold. Went on the back side of that, zip tied it up, and then made my way over to that pocket. Now, this one does have a plastic cover. There's just going to be a series of hardware that's kind of holding this in place along the top here, on the bottom, and these are just 7mm screws, and then a few on this back. You can leave these last ones here, just pull this down, and then make sure that your green wire is going to be over here so we can pull that up later. Now, I mentioned that white wire. That's going to come into play to jump in between the 2 taillights. So we're going to grab our white wire and run that on the back. Here we have a hitch on ours, so using that hitch to kind of run it across the whole length is going to be a great way to do it. You can zip tie it up. Just make sure you have plenty of length on each side, and we can trim as necessary. At this point, we're going to get both of the taillights taken out because obviously we need to tap into the wires. That way we can illuminate our taillights as we're towing. And to do that on the Maverick, you're going to just lower your tailgate down. An 8mm socket is going to get these 2 screws taken out. And to get the taillight to pop out, some of these Mavericks are a little bit tricky. There's an alignment tab kind of on the outside edge, and it is rather tough sometimes to get it to pop out. So There's a few different ways that you can do this. You can just kind of pull out kind of this way. And the problem, though, is you start to see that this can rub against your paint. So if you want to, you can put a little bit of painter's tape or something along that edge to kind of soften that. You can also be very careful with a plastic trim tool. And putting this wedge in here is going to give that pressure. And then so when I come up top here, that's going to want to pop that alignment tab out. And as we get a bigger gap, you can start to pry on it a little bit. The main thing is don't put direct pressure on the outside edge. You can actually chip these fairly easily. But there we go. So that alignment, you can see, is right here. So pulling this out kind of at a 45 is what we're looking for. So that's why when you pry it, you just kind of loosen that up a little bit for that notch to go. Sometimes just wiggling the taillight will do it. If you have a bunch of dirt and dust are built up on here, it might be worthwhile to spray it with some soapy water. That'll help kind of lubricate that. Once you have the taillight taken out, we're just going to unplug it. So we have a red locking tab. Push that back. Push on your tab, and we have this separated. We can put our taillight in the bed of our truck. I'm going to get the other one taken out and get it to a point like this. Now with both of the plugs, you're going to see that there's a plastic tube that keeps it structurally sound behind here, which is great, but this insulating tape, we're going to want to cut this back because at some point we need to cut into the wires to get our signal there. So I'm using just a zip tie cutter here to just kind of get the tape peeled back. Be careful if you're using a cutting blade that you don't nick any of the wires in the process. They're very small, and cutting or having an opening in the insulation can make for not a great wiring connection. So I just go through, cut this, and sometimes you might get lucky and you can just start to unravel this back. But we're going to go back to where this plastic tube is. So just take this entire section off. It's going to give us a lot more room to work. Now the wires we're going to be attacking, if you hold where the locking tab is, on the right we have a white with green and we have a solid purple. And that's going to be our second one over. Now that's important because you'll see there's another purple. It's got a stripe on it. We're not going to be using that one. We want to make sure it's the first and the second. If you're looking at it this way, I guess it would be the first and second, but green with or white with green and purple. And at this point, we're just going to kind of spread those apart, and we're going to make a cut into our wires. I tend to go a little bit further back than the plug. It allows for that diode to have a space while we plug this in. So I'm going to go right about here, and we're going to strip back both ends. Now, being tiny wires, I'd recommend stripping them back a little bit extra, and that way you can double up that wire, and it'll have a little bit more of a bite into our spade connectors. So we're going to strip back those ends as well as these ends. And at this point, we can grab our spade connectors because we're going to be attaching it to these wires, and they're eventually going to go to the diodes to create that circuit or loop. And so twisting my wires and just putting a bend, again, that's just going to give it a little bit more to bite onto. So I'll get these all prepped. Now we'll grab our spade connectors, and there's going to be purple ones and then blue ones, and it might be hard to see. They look like they're almost the same gauge wiring. So I'm going to put the purple ones on, and we're just going to slide this over, make sure that the wire's in there, and we're going to crimp them down. Now something I recommend doing so you don't have to chase any loose connections, after you crimp, just give it a quick tug. It should stay on, no problem. If it does fall off, re-crimp it, because there's nothing worse than getting all your electrical working or hooked up and something's a little off, and it could be just from a loose wire. So making sure we make those connections really good right now is going to be best for everyone involved. So once these are crimped, we can actually grab our diodes. So have those handy, because we can start to make our connection, at least for our factory wires. And the way we're going to do that is you'll see that on each of the diodes it'll say, well, right now it says knee, but in and out. Out faces towards the plug. So grab the out one and go towards the plug. Plug one of the diodes into our purple and one of the diodes into the white with green. Now we'll just match them color to color. So it doesn't matter which one you use up top here. Just make sure that the purple is connecting to the purple. and then white with green to white with green. So now those wires that we ran back, we're going to be tying them into these spades. But to get those pulled through, you can almost see them through here. I can actually reach in and grab my wires. I'm going to pass up yellow, brown, and white. So if you haven't run those, make sure you do that now. I'm going to pass them through here. And the chances of having excess is probably pretty high, just like we have here, and that's okay. I'm going to pull back a decent sized length here, and then we're going to cut them all. Now we'll split the yellow and brown. I'm just kind of peel this back. And we're going to strip back the ends of all of the wires. And that white I mentioned is a jumper, and that's going to be for running lights. So it's going to go from one taillight to the other. So what we'll do is our white and brown, we're going to tie these together. So I'll twist them up, and we'll grab a purple spade. And this may get a little tight here, but I was able to get those both slid on, and I'll crimp this down. Now they do also include some quick splices. You could just quick splice that white into the brown. Main thing is they're just getting the signal from the same spot. So with that crimped down properly, this is going to be our running light, but we'll also get our yellow one with a purple. Now when putting these on the diodes, our yellow is our turn signal. So that is going to go to the white with green. And our purple wire is our running light. So that's where our jumper, our brown and white, are going to go. And also important, I slid this on, it went pretty easy. Sometimes that spade can go underneath the connector. Make sure it's sliding in. It should give you some resistance and really hold in place. So with those connected, what I like to do is any of the excess wire you can kind of zip tie up back here because we have a pocket, but I like to make sure that these wires aren't going to pull out of there. And so I take electrical tape and just tape this all up so it's a nice little wire strain, and then from there we can grab our taillight, put it back in place, and then we'll head over to our other side. Our passenger side is going to be very similar. The colors of the wires are going to change. So the ones that we're going to be cutting, again, it is going to be the 1 and 2. So this is like a violet with light purple and then white with orange. So make sure that you have these ones, and we just connected our diodes. The white with orange is going to be our running light. So that white jumper wire we'll attach there. Our green wire is going to go to the violet and purple. So I'll get this taped up and get my this tail light in, and then from here we're going to head up front. And at this point, you may or may not want to, depending on what kind of 6-pole bracket you have. Sometimes it's easier to do it after you get the fascia on, and then you can get that bracket nice and clean without having to pass it through the grill. As I showed you up on ours, it's loose. So I'm going to get our fascia kind of put in place, and then we'll get ready to tie that into the 6-pole, and then we'll test it, and we'll be good to go. Now at the front, we're going to get our 6-pole mounted up. So go ahead, you can grab that. You're going to want a small flathead screwdriver and your wire strippers. So what we'll do is pull this off, and this is where we're going to be tying in our wires. So we'll take the boot first, and I'm going to just slide this over our wires. So you can see I've also put a little wire loom here. You can do this after the fact, but we'll slide these through, and we'll just kind of set that back for now. And eventually we're going to be plugging it in through here. So make sure that you have it through your bracket, and we're going to split the wires up. And we'll peel these back. We're going to strip back just about maybe a little less than 1/4 of an inch, somewhere in 1/4 is probably fine. And again, you may or may not have this red wire, but if you are doing a charge line, make sure that you're getting that in place as well. And once we get these all stripped, I recommend twisting your wires to get a nice tight wound of them. It's going to make it better for our plug to be able to bite into the wire, but also easier to feed the wires in. So with those stripped on our plug, there's going to be corresponding spots where it goes, and it's molded in. You'll see the arrows pointing to each of them. So I'll start by, we'll do our charge line first. That's going to be our tall one. Now, something to keep in mind, if you installed your charge line, make sure it's not hooked up to the battery at this point because it can arc. So we'll just back our screw out. Don't completely remove it because they are small and hard to get back in place. And then once that's seated, make sure that's got a good bite. We'll snug this down. No need to get crazy. You want it to be able to hold in place long term, but also if you go too tight, it can actually damage the wires and create it to be not a good secure location. So moving at our 12 o'clock position, TM is pointing to this. So we're going to go off to the side and loosen up the screw. You should see that open up. And just leave enough space to get your wire in. This is going to be our brown wire. This is our running lights, or TM is tail marker. So if you're going for what those small letters mean, this one being tail marker, will go in here. And we'll just kind of keep moving. Our next one is going to be GD, which goes here. That's our ground. So that'll be our white wire. And see, I'm going to go back and retighten this. So make sure that you do have enough room to get these wires to work. You want to make sure it doesn't become loose over time. But I'll get my ground in, and then that's just going to leave us with LT, which is left turn. That's our yellow. And then RT, which is our right turn, which is green. So I'll get these all attached. Now, we're not going to be using the S. A lot of times you can use that if you have an indicator patch cable. Sometimes you can tie that into it. But for the most part, we generally don't use that. So I'll get these all attached, get it all tightened down, and then I'll show you some other things to kind of just prolong the lifespan of the plug. Once you have them tightened down, just give them one more quick tug, make sure that they're in place, and this lives on the front of your vehicle. So anything you're driving through right now, it's raining out, so once this vehicle's out on the road, this is going to be exposed to a lot of water. And you know, for the most part, that boot's going to keep everything protected, but also it's just going to be moisture. And so we want to make sure that our connections say for the entirety of, you know, while you own the vehicle. So RTV silicone, just putting this all in this intersection is going to create a nice, like, well, basically protection. It's going to seal this all up and just make sure that there's no potential for water to get in. This is completely up to you, but just from what we've learned of keeping wiring working long term, this is definitely a good way to do that. Once you have it completely all gooped in there, make sure there's no voids. You can put the boot on. You can backfill it as well and fill all that up. That's completely up to you as well. But what I'll do is I'll slide the boot over and then grab your electrical tape and tape that boot onto the 6-pole. This is also going to just help keep that in place, but also create another seal. And if you want, you can leave the tape just kind of ready to go, and you can use some wire loom to clean up these wires. So it looks nice and clean on the front of your vehicle. And so I'll get these kind of put into our wire loom. And the wire loom, you can just cut it to where it, you know, it's going to sit in the boot a little bit, and then just make this tighter, and you can slide it in the boot, and then we can tape that up. And so it's going to seal on both ends. Once that boot is taped up, we're just going to mount up our plug, and we're going to want to test to make sure that it's working. So grab your umbilical, and if you have your RV handy and you're ready to hook it up, you can run through the light signals on the RV and have someone check the taillights on your towed vehicle, and that way you can see if they're all working properly before hitting the road. Now I'm going to be using a test box to test mine before we hook it up to the RV, but it's going to be a similar concept. So with this plugged in, we'll run through the running lights, the turn signals, as well as the brakes. There's running lights, left turn signal, right turn signal, and then brakes. Once you verified that the lights are working properly, you're ready to either start driving your vehicle, or you're ready to hook up, get all of your components set up, your vehicle in flat tow mode, and start enjoying your newly installed Demco diodes on your 2025 Ford Maverick.